The summer I was 10. The old house on Maple Lane wore the heat like a skin I borrowed from the sun, thin at the edges and lustreless where it pressed the most. We called it the White House, though its paint peeled to reveal the pale, tired wood beneath, as if the house had coughed up a memory it could no longer swallow. The cicadas pressed their thin voices through the screens, and the lilacs bent over the troughs of the porch, their fragrance a soft insistence that everything was ordinary and good, even when the floorboards seemed to sigh with every footstep. In those days we learned to speak softly to the rooms, as if a room could listen without seeming to, and we learned to listen back. My grandmother, who kept the keys to every door as if they were small secrets, showed me a ritual for keeping the house from forgetting us. We would place a coin on the sill of the kitchen window each dawn, and whisper a name, one name, carefully chosen, spoken to the thin light that slipped between the glass and the frame. Then we would murmur a wish, a promise to return, and step away with our breath held tight enough to feel it echo along the cornice. The ritual did not start as something cruel, merely as a habit grown from routine fear. In those summers, the town slept late and woke early, and the house seemed to breathe in between. The coin's metal warmth would be a small offering, the whispered name a soft anchor. If the house forgot us, it forgot nothing that mattered to us, and everything else would drift away, the way a boat forgets its harbour when the tide leaves it stranded on a strange shore. We believed the house remembered because we remembered it, and the very memory of it was a kind of protection. The first shadow came not with a scream, but with a weathered quiet. Nellie, my neighbour's sister, vanished one afternoon in the middle of a bright storm, the kind that makes every street lamp look like a bone picked from a grave. She had been the first to teach me the ritual. She had stood on the porch with me, her hair catching rain like threads of black silk, and laughed at the way the air smelled of old coins and rainwater. After the disappearance, the coin on the sill never warmed the way it used to, and the house began to keep its own little secrets. We found Nellie's mitten in the broad-rooted shadow under the elm by the well. Its colour faded to a pale grey where the rain had teased it, as if the glove had aged more in the hours since the storm than a person could in a year. The house hummed with a new, quiet insistence after that, like an old friend who suddenly stopped listening and then began to hear only you. The floorboards would creak in time with a breath, and the stair treads bore a lighter footprint than mine, though I was the only one who lived there during the day. It was as though the walls remembered Nellie long after Nellie could remember herself. Decades pressed down then, and life moved to the soft, melancholy tempo of aging. I left Maple Lane with my mother's stories folded into my coat, carried them into more ordinary kinds of rooms, offices and apartments, and a town that grew up around the old house's memory, as if the memory itself had leaves that unfurled in autumn. I learned to walk past the gate without looking up at the windows, to tell myself that the house was a rumour, nothing more than the rumour a town tells itself when it wants to pretend it hasn't changed. But time has a way of returning the old things to you, sometimes wearing a different hat, sometimes speaking in a familiar voice that you forgot you once learned to trust. Years later, after my wife fell asleep for the last time, and I returned to the place where I had learned to listen to doors, the White House did not immediately look any different. It wore its long memory, as if it had lived through every summer of my life, and kept them laid out, neatly pressed, in a cabinet behind the pantry. The coin on the sill glowed faintly in the late afternoon light, not warm exactly, but with a patient glow that suggested it had waited for a long time to be noticed again. The air smelled of lilac, a little rain, and something like old sugar. It was the kind of scent that makes a man feel he has slept through a part of his own life and has woken inside someone else's dream. I came back with the same careful manner I had learned in childhood. As though the house could still hear a tremor of fear in my footsteps and respond with something gentle and curiously wise. The attic door, which I had always believed led to a room preserved in a cake-crumbed forgotten time, remained as it had always been, a stubborn seam in the ceiling where dust gathered, and the world looked down on itself through a narrow, sleepy lens. The coin still rested on the sill, though the window above it bore more paint cracks than I remembered, as if the house itself had decided to learn to shed its old skin and wear its age with more honesty. You could hear the house in the quiet, a breath in the plaster, as if the walls themselves exhaled after a long day of listening to the world go by. The kitchen table still held the blemish of a coffee ring I had once tried to scrub away with the stubbornness of youth. The lamp on the wall flickered in a way that suggested it was listening, counting my breaths the way a mother counts a child's. It was not frightening in that raw, violent way horror demands. It was the news of something long expected, like the slow letting go of a held breath. And then, at the edge of the night, the attic door breathed. The hinges whispered a hymn old as the boards, and a light, pale as a butterfly's wing, drifted through the crack, as though the air itself had learned a new way to drift. I climbed the stairs with a careful, adult humility, pausing as if the house might teach me something I forgot how to hear. The attic, which had always appeared to me as a tomb of clean air and old trunks, opened up its own small room, the room that never existed in the stillness of daylight, the one you suppose your mind has invented when you are very young and you imagine the past cannot find you there. In that room stood a bed, a wardrobe, and a single, small chair that seemed too large for a child's room. The air smelled of mothballs and rain, the way a memory smells when you walk into it, and it pretends to be new, but can't quite pretend. On the bed lay a photograph, the one Nellie had kept in her pocket when she vanished, perhaps the last thing she ever touched in ordinary daylight. The image was faded to a pale fingerprint of what it had been. Nellie, young and bold, standing at the edge of the elm-shadowed yard, her hair caught by a single drop of rain. Beside her, a boy stood, not quite a silhouette, not quite a memory, with eyes that looked at you as if they already knew your name. The room was not empty of